Get Up, where the business of the National Football League continues while all the games and the other sports, for the most part, have ceased. And the players' vote on the new collective bargaining agreement is still set to end at essentially midnight tomorrow night. If they vote no, the financial impact could be enormous. Teams will have to navigate cap rules in a manner that could depress spending. There's a lot of that out there. And then there's this. Saints punter Thomas Morstead was on Twitter and had this to say. He tweeted, "Our union is in a position to secure economic certainty in a very uncertain climate. The sports world is not immune to global events, as we all can see. No deal is ever perfect, but there are real improvements to most areas that impact current and former players. If we turn this deal down, I believe we pay for it down the road. Personally, this is not fear-mongering, it's just reality." That from one player and, of course, a member of the Players Association. And Dan, I would ask again, is there any discussion to your knowledge? It came up, the notion of allowing players to change their vote was raised, and it was decided they'd not be allowed to. These are, as you have pointed out this morning, unprecedented circumstances that are evolving rapidly. Is there any discussion about changing that decision and letting players change their vote if they want to?
As of early this morning, no. What happened is on Monday, when they were at their annual meeting, the Board of Player Reps voted, do we want to allow players who've already voted on this issue to change their votes? And the vote came back no. So you can't change your vote. Would they reconsider it? Again, as of an hour or so ago, the answer was no. But we'll see what happens. I think what Morstead is tweeting about really kind of underlines the point that DeMaurice Smith, the union's executive director, and Eric Winston, the outgoing union president, have been trying to make in favor of the deal, which is, hey, there's probably uncertain economic times coming. There's probably some sort of economic downturn coming. We need to keep that in mind when we consider what to do on this. So obviously Morstead is coming from a position of, hey, it's here. You should consider this when you vote. The question is whether the message that was coming from those other folks before the thing actually happened as a warning was heeded by players or whether they ignored it.
Well, the owners also would be aware of maybe an impending economic downturn. Could they be having second thoughts?
Yeah, Laura, that's an interesting point. As we know, when they voted for the agreement, it wasn't unanimous. And now, as we know, things are really different from several weeks ago. So what's interesting to me is if the owners could revote, what would their position be? And I think the other variable, just following up on what Dan was talking about, is 60% of the NFL players make the minimum. If this new agreement is passed, over the next 3 years, that same player from the old system to the new system would get an additional $495,000 in their pocket, which is a lot of, over a 3-year period. It was a lot of money 10 days ago. It's even more significant now given what's going on in the world. So I think Dan brings up a fascinating point, and I think between now and tomorrow night, literally, I'm sure they're going to try to get more people to vote, and whether or not the owners want to revisit it is another interesting dynamic.
They are sending out regular reminders. Please vote if you haven't voted already. Now, early this week, when the players arrived at their meeting in Miami, they were told, this is as of Monday, that 1,200 people had already voted, roughly. That's about half of the people who were eligible to vote. So a lot of those votes were cast in the early part of the window, which began last Thursday. So obviously not being able to change them, there's a limited number of people that Thomas Morstead can influence.
You were telling me this morning that as far as the decision not to allow players to change their votes earlier in the week, which side of it that seemed to have been the one pushing for that?
Again, based on just my conversations with agents and people, it seemed like it was a group of players that had voted no and reconsidered and wanted to change their votes to yes. So again, that's a non-scientific survey, but that's the sense I was getting on Monday when we found out about that vote.
And again, I think sequence is critical here. We'll know Saturday night about the CBA. Like you said, Greeny, it triggers a whole bunch of rules, but I think Sunday is when we'll really know, does free agency start within 24 hours? And so many things flow from there. Franchise tags. We're talking about the biggest names in the sport right now. Dak Prescott, Tom Brady, and I think we'll know a lot more by Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, the business of this does continue. So there are no games being played for the most part as we speak, but there is a lot of business still being conducted if indeed they don't change that. And as Dan has pointed out this morning, all of this remains fluid. Golf is our next stop, where they did play yesterday, but now they won't for some time. They played the first round of the Players' Championship yesterday, and then the PGA Tour announced that they were canceling the remainder of that event and all PGA Tour events through the Valero Texas Open on April 2nd. Here's the Tour Commissioner, Jay Monahan, just moments ago.
We're obviously incredibly disappointed to suspend the PGA Tour season for our players and our fans. It's not right to be out here. It's not right to be playing, even though we feel like we've created a safe environment. and we don't have any reason to think that anybody that would be out here has the coronavirus. The fact that everybody is questioning or asking questions like that, though, is something you have to take very seriously.
Well, let's bring Michael Collins into this conversation. And Michael, you were there covering the Players' Championship for us. What was the reaction and what was the feeling there as the entire sports world was canceling their events while these guys were out there playing?
I guess the best way to describe it would be a little bit nervous, but plenty of understanding. All of these events that were being canceled were being held in indoor arenas. So all the guys, caddies, and players that are out on the golf course were nervous that all of those events were being canceled, but they were also understanding that it was a lot of people in an enclosed space where golf is played on an outdoor setting. I mean, this golf course is on 41 acres here at the TPC Players and the stadium course where we are. So guys felt a little bit better. Also, because they are inside the ropes and walking down middles of fairways, they're sometimes 20 to 50 yards away from spectators. And then when the announcement was made that there weren't going to be any spectators on the golf course on Friday, guys thought to themselves, well, okay, we definitely can get through that. But I got to tell you, in hearing what Jay Monahan just said, I was just speaking to Billy Horschel and asked him specifically, have you been tested? Do you know any players or caddies who've been tested? And he said no and no to both of those questions.
Rory McIlroy is among the players who talked about this, stressing the importance of all players getting tested. What effect do you think that had on everybody?
It had a big effect. I mean, we know now, or we're learning, the gestation period of this virus can be a while. So I think the nightmare scenario for the PGA Tour and Commissioner Jay Monahan would have been if someone who was in this field next week or 2 weeks from now tested positive for this virus. When would they have contracted it? Would they have been spreading it around this week here at the Players' Championship? And the fact that Rory McIlroy said everyone should be tested, and if they test positive, we should shut this thing down, I think that hit home a little bit.
All right, so Michael, we are under a month away from the biggest event on the golf calendar, and that, of course, is the Masters in Augusta, Georgia in early April. What feeling is there from the people you're talking to about the likelihood that that event is still played?
Whether it's played, I think the big question is there are so many questions on the table right now. Number one, the first event that's coming up happens the weekend before, which is the Augusta National Women's Amateur, where women from all over the world come in to compete in this event, and that ends up at Augusta National, and then the drive, chip, and putt. An announcement we expect is going to be made next week from Augusta National. That's the expectation. Now, whether or not it happens is another thing, but there are so many different scenarios that could happen. Could they move the tournament? Rory McIlroy mentioned if we're going to play it, when it's scheduled to be played, we can't have any patrons on the golf course. Is that an option that's out there for them? How would that look? What would it sound like? So there are a lot of things. There are a lot of moving parts to this. But quite honestly, if you ask most people right now, is Augusta going to happen? Most people say probably, but probably without people.
All right, Michael Collins, so well done. Thank you, my friend, and we will check in with you as this continues to evolve. We roll on here this morning on ESPN Get Up, and we will tell you about the day that sports effectively shut down in the U.S. We'll tell you why the NCAA made the decision that it did, and much more as we continue with you on this very unusual morning. It's Get Up on ESPN.